Chapter 1. So It Begins. Eve was confronted by the intense sunlight the minute she opened the front door and walked out. Momentary blindness caused her to stumble. The positioning of a nearby column was the only thing that prevented her fall. She paused to recover, her eyes narrowed to a slit. Walking in one's yard should not be so dangerous. On the upside, the stroll to the mailbox was Eve's chance to breathe without her children at her side. The hike to the mailbox was short, so she hadn't bothered to grab her sunglasses, a staple for every good FBI agent. The morning smelled of fresh-cut grass, fragrant flowers, and newly paved roads. The day would be beautiful and sunny, but in Alabama, almost every day is a beautiful, sunny, humdrum, boring kind of bloody day. She looked about with satisfaction at the artificial order surrounding her. 7 nearly identical cookie-cutter homes lined the road, with manicured lawns, clean sidewalks, dedicated flower gardens, and each home complementing the next. The community may have been new, but it was designed to look like old money plantation homes. Her house sat on a quiet suburban cul-de-sac in the heart of Cottage Hill, near Mobile. You did not find this kind of living in New York City. Real estate properties were much lower in Alabama, affording them the ability to purchase a home for the same monthly costs as her rental back in Brooklyn. Boy, did she miss that place. She no longer experienced the money struggles that shaped her youth. Her husband's mother came from a wealthy family, and her love came in the form of material items. It brought her mother-in-law pleasure to shower them with gifts of money, vehicles, anything they wanted or needed. Yet, even with the beauty and order all around, Eve could not recall a time in her life feeling so completely underwhelmed. She walked with great care, avoiding the cracks in the pavement. God knows why. Probably haunts from her childhood, when she was afraid that if she stepped on one, she would hurt her mother's back, and her mother would be unable to return to Eve and her father. There were not a lot of sidewalks or cracks in the deserts, and Eve avoided them all, but her mother never returned to them. Yes, stupid superstitions, but she continued to step carefully until she reached the mailbox. It's strange that something as simple as a trip to the mailbox was such an important part of her day. Her actions were subtle, but an observant eye would notice the extra pep in each step. Eve was positively eager as she readied herself to open the black box, a door to the unknown. She was about to have contact with the outside world, with someone other than her husband, the nanny, her newborn, and the mini Eve toddler running about inside. As expected, there was a stack of mail, different colors, sizes, and weights. A quick flip-through indicated that at least half of them were junk, the others likely bills. All of it required a more thorough investigation. Eve was in the last month of her 3-month maternity leave, and she was stir-crazy. Going through the mail piece by piece gave her something to do that didn't involve diapers or baby sharks. She made it back to the 2-story colonial and slipped off her shoes just in time to hear her 2-year-old daughter tiptoeing down the open-tread staircase. Harper was supported only by the spindles because, at under 3 foot tall, she was too short to reach the handrail. Nevertheless, she had mastered going up the stairs this way much sooner than going down them. Harper was sporting her favorite Superman pajamas and jumped off the bottom step, pretending to fly. Eve could not help but smile. She remembered those days when she too had a vivid imagination and believed being a superhero was possible. Her husband, Franklin, was the decorator in the family, and the home reflected his taste. All his talk during their first date about not enjoying growing up in England in his parents' drafty estate home was clearly a lie. Everything in the home screamed British colonialism. Teak woods, textiles printed with exotic patterns depicting local scenes, flora and fauna, and beautifully aged, well-traveled chocolate and tan leather trunks with tarnished brass buckles and clasps. Eve didn't mind. She liked the style. It evoked a bygone era that was genteel and elegant, while at the same time appearing relaxed and comfortable, so different from the sand-ridden trailers and tents from her youth. The same theme was carried into the nursery, replacing the deep mahogany and brown finishes found in the rest of the home. This room, dedicated to children and play, sported fresh whites and soft grays and whitewashed hardwood floors, ceiling fans, and, in place of curtains or blinds, plantation shutters. The room boasted a rattan rocking chair, a simple canopy bed with makeshift rails for Harper, and a white teak crib for Franklin. The floors were littered with plush rugs, colorful, oversized pillows, and stuffed exotic animals of all sizes. A crayon-decorated white bookcase was home to books, puzzles, and board games. Trunks were chock full of toys. Harper's dollhouse and baby doll kitchen were kept well ordered and off the floor. Eve accepted no excuses for it to be otherwise. Harper was still transitioning into a big girl bed, so she had access to her playthings throughout the night. On more than one occasion, Eve woke in the early morning hours to hear her daughter singing as she played happily by herself in the nursery. Eve had no idea kids could be so messy, but a maid showed up every day after breakfast and tidied up the place, making life more tolerable. She ordered the house and was gone before Eve returned from the gym. Back at the Society for Humanity, or SFH commune, where she grew up, there were very few young people, and cleanliness seemed to be a priority for all the residents. Sure, one or two people were just a little unique in their attire and space, but they were the exceptions. Eve opened the fridge and pulled out a pitcher of unsweetened organic apple juice and filled a sippy cup for Harper. She had to give it a taste. The name sounded awful. What kind of person drinks unsweetened juice? Her first impulse was to spit it out into the sink, but she managed to swallow. It truly was unpleasant, and she couldn't believe her daughter drank the stuff. After distracting Harper with a video and food, Eve sat down at the table, ready to sort through the mail. The amount of paper waste annoyed Eve. Do people not understand it's the electronic age? The stack was high, so she categorized the pile into junk, bills, and other. She found one of particular interest. It was a 5x7 manila envelope with a disc and string closure and no return address. How fascinating. Eve opened it carefully because she feared paper cuts, not out of worry that she might damage the contents. Paper cuts were the absolute worst. Eve was sure that she would rather take a bullet than have a paper cut, but, she supposed, it depended on where the shot enters the body. Eve admonished herself for being so easily sidetracked. She stared back down at the envelope with anticipation. What she pulled out was a series of photos of herself from 3 years prior. Not just any photos, but ones that made her heart skip a beat. Eve, as a rule, tried, albeit largely unsuccessfully, to control her emotions, and when alone in her kitchen, looking at photos that could likely change her life, her emotions ran wild. The tingling started at her toes and spread throughout her body. Her mind was racing, and her heart was thumping so loud she was sure everyone in the house could hear it. Eve dropped the packet and pictures back onto the table, got up abruptly, and moved to the counter to make herself a cup of Death Wish coffee. The high caffeine content, and the fact that it was made in upstate New York, were just two of the reasons this brand was her favorite. Unlike her go-to, Starbucks, it was smooth and easy to drink. She was thankful those dreaded 9 months of pregnancy were over. Eve paused, one elbow on the counter, eyes wide. She stared at the items on the table while listening to the water from Keurig's reservoir gurgle down into the machine and eventually make its way through the coffee grounds and into her cup. Eve returned to the chair, took a deep swallow, enjoying the coffee's cherry and chocolate notes, and sat back down. A smile cracked her face. Oh boy, did she have a good feeling about this day. Eve picked up the photos, one at a time. The images were clear, very professional, definitely not a product of CCTV. God knows she's seen her share of the grainy quality CCTV snaps. Why, in this day and age, can they not improve the quality? She knew the answer. CCTV captures everyone in the frame equally, whereas a camera has a focus. Unlike Eve at the moment. When did she become so easily distracted? This would have never happened when she was working in the field. In one shot, she could make out her own face under a black curly wig on the street outside the hotel. In another, she was easily recognizable, holding the gun used to shoot 2 security officers. A third photo was a picture of Eve with the backpack containing the bomb that would cause the destruction of an insurance company on Wall Street. But then there were more, all showing Eve on that eventful day 3 years earlier. It seemed like a lifetime ago. At the time of the bombing, Eve had been an active FBI agent, fresh off an undercover assignment. Still, the activities in the photos were not sanctioned by the FBI because, as we all know, the FBI does not sanction killing. Ever. The images documented Eve's part in a plot she and her father had carried out in homage to her stepmother and as a warning to insurance agencies. Change your ways or you'll be next. In other words, based on the definition of terrorism, Eve and her father were domestic terrorists. However, this behavior was a one-time thing, not a career path. 3 years ago, Special Agent Evelyn Eve Black was part of the New York FBI field office and worked a particular case going undercover at the International Defense Exhibition Conference, or IDEC. Unbeknownst to her boss, Special Agent in Charge, or SAC, Adam Lange, Eve had another motive. She needed to find a terrorist cell to blame for the planned bombing. The insurance company canceled Camilla's coverage when she was diagnosed with diabetes mellitus type 2. Insulin costs were so high that she was forced to parcel out what little medicine she could afford. After a few weeks of inadequate self-regulation, she fell into a diabetic coma and never recovered. John, Eve's father, was oblivious to Camilla's plight, and her death shocked him. There were several reasons he could blame himself, such as never bothering to get a real job with better insurance. Instead, he had relied on his online hacking business to provide for his family. In John's eyes, the fault was not his. He blamed a flawed government, one that did not care about the poor and disenfranchised. The government gave too much power to insurance companies, and the American people suffered. Eve's childhood had been unique. Her father, Leonard Wilkins, a.k.a. John Black, was a member of the socialist college group turned terrorist organization, the Weathermen. When the Weathermen was deemed a terrorist group, her father, mother, and young Eve went underground to prevent the FBI from finding and arresting Leonard as one of the outspoken leaders of the faction. Eve spent her first years continually on the move with her parents, rarely spending more than a night or two in any one location. The nomadic lifestyle was too much for Eve's mother. She was unable to cope, so she left her small family and moved back to Michigan with her parents. John survived his wife's departure thanks to the support of his Weatherman friends. When Eve was 5 years old, John and several of his socialist comrades caravanned to New Mexico, 30 miles north of Taos, and started a commune. The population grew over time, and the community evolved into the village of Tres Piedras, New Mexico. The community continued to foster an atmosphere of anti-government intellectuals and became a home for anyone with similar beliefs. Because of his role with the Weatherman, John was the unofficial leader of the leaderless settlement. Even some 30 years later, the flock looked to him for guidance and advice. When Eve's mother left her husband and small daughter, John was crushed. He spiraled into depression. Drinking heavily and isolating himself, he left raising his daughter to the community. Several years later, when Eve was a spunky, adventurous, and somewhat ill-mannered 10-year-old, Camilla visited the compound. She met and fell in love with both John and his young daughter, and never left. Camilla changed their lives. John put aside his drinking and rejoined the small society, and little Eve had a mother again. Camilla brought love and structure to her new family and the group. Life in the desert was isolated and quiet. As a community, the residents chose not to be distracted by television, the government's tool to spread its message to the masses. Instead, they listened to music, read books, and had lengthy socialist-leaning discussions, and invited the few children to engage. Eve's father was the exception. There was an old military bunker on the land, one of the primary reasons in which they squatted there so many years ago. Inside that bunker he had a shortwave radio, the only way he had at the time to relay telephone and telegraph communications over great distances. The obsession to be connected evolved from shortwaves into Wi-Fi. Computers occupied much of her father's time in her early years. Eve had very few friends and spent much of her time alone. Keenly observant, and aware of her and the community's uniqueness, she watched and listened to people in the stores and on the streets during supply runs in the nearby town. Eve learned to imitate the behavior of others very well, reading their body language, observing both verbal and nonverbal methods of communication, and mimicking their mannerisms. This was a skill she perfected over the years. When Eve left her home in New Mexico for Columbia University in New York, her childhood upbringing in the small desert community made her an ill fit among her wealthy, highly socialized classmates. Social interaction was not the only thing that left her feeling like an outcast. Everything made her feel this way, right down to the television shows and movies her contemporaries often referenced. The first semester at the university was difficult. Still, she could blend in using the talent that she had been honing since age 12.